She doesn't belong at this table, Isabella sneered, her voice a thin, venomous whisper that carried with perfect clarity across the polished mahogany. The words were a shard of glass aimed directly at Lena, who felt the collective gaze of a dozen impossibly wealthy, impossibly dangerous people land on her like a physical weight. Her simple black dress, the nicest thing she owned, suddenly felt like a cheap costume. Her hands, calloused from her work as a nurse, curled into fists in her lap. A thick, predatory silence descended. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. She kept her chin high, her eyes fixed on a point just past the woman's perfectly coiffed blonde hair, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. She could feel Dante's presence beside her, a radiating heat of controlled fury. The air around him seemed to crackle, to thicken with a pressure that made it hard to breathe. Isabella smiled, a slow, cruel curving of her lips. She had known Dante for years, had been part of this world, his world, since birth. She looked at Lena as if she were something unpleasant scraped off the bottom of a shoe. Then Dante moved. He didn't shout. He didn't slam his fist on the table. He simply placed his napkin down beside his plate and stood up. The motion was fluid, deliberate, and it commanded absolute attention. Every eye swiveled to him. The quiet power he radiated was more terrifying than any outburst could ever be. He looked not at Isabella, but at Lena. His dark eyes, which could be so cold and hard, were filled with a raw, protective tenderness that stole her breath. He reached down and offered her his hand. Then he turned his gaze to the rest of the table, a sweeping, dismissive look that stripped them of their power and prestige. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and lethally calm. It cut through the silence like a scalpel. "You're right," he said, the words dropping like stones into a deep well. "She doesn't." He paused, letting the confirmation hang in the air, letting Isabella's smug satisfaction bloom for a single fleeting second before he crushed it completely. "She is better than this table. She is better than this room. She is better than every single person sitting in it." His eyes finally landed on Isabella, cold and flat as a frozen lake. "Especially you." He didn't wait for a response. His hand tightened around Lena's, and he pulled her gently to her feet. "We're leaving." And with that one declaration, he turned his back on his entire life, leading her away from the suffocating darkness and out into the cool night air, leaving a stunned and shattered silence in their wake. It had all started 3 months earlier, in the chaotic, fluorescent-lit world of a downtown emergency room. That was Lena Petrova's world. It smelled of antiseptic, desperation, and stale coffee. Her life was a cycle of 12-hour shifts, mounting student loan debt, and a tiny apartment she shared with her best friend, Chloe. She was perpetually tired, a bone-deep exhaustion that had become her constant companion. But she was a good nurse. She was resilient. He had been brought in on a Saturday night, the witching hour for the ER. A man in a suit so exquisitely tailored it seemed offensive in the grime of the trauma bay. He was tall, with broad shoulders that strained the fabric, and a face that looked like it had been carved from unforgiving granite. Dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes that missed nothing. A thin, white scar traced the line of his jaw, a stark contrast to his tanned skin. He was bleeding from a deep gash on his forearm, yet his expression was one of bored impatience. Beside him stood another man, equally large but with the watchful, silent stillness of a trained guard. "Laceration, possible arterial involvement, some kind of altercation," the paramedic rattled off. "Vitals are stable." Lena didn't look at his face. She looked at the wound. That was her job, to see the injury, not the man. "All right, let's get him into Bay 3. I'll take it," she said, her voice crisp with professionalism. It was only when she was cleaning the wound, her touch firm and steady, that he spoke. His voice was a low rumble, a deep baritone that vibrated through her gloves. "You have steady hands." Lena didn't look up. I'd be in the wrong profession if I didn't. A faint smile touched his lips. What is your name? My name is on my badge, she replied, her tone flat. She wasn't paid to make friends. She was paid to stitch people up. It was then that she made the mistake of meeting his eyes, and the world tilted on its axis. It was not a spark, it was a collision. His gaze was so intense, so focused, it felt as if he were looking past her skin and bones, straight into the weary, stubborn core of her soul. For Dante Volkov, head of the Volkov Bratva and heir to a brutal empire, the world didn't just tilt. It stopped. He had seen beauty before. He had commanded it, bought it, grown bored of it. He was surrounded by women who were polished to a high sheen, their worth measured in carats and couture. But this woman, she was different. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, stray strands clinging to her temples. There were faint shadows of exhaustion under her eyes. But in those eyes, a clear, startling gray, he saw a strength that humbled him. He saw a principled weariness, an integrity that his world of shadows and blood money could never corrupt. In the sterile, chaotic noise of the ER, she was the only thing that was real. He knew in that single, frozen moment, with a certainty that shook him to his foundations, that he had to have her. It wasn't just desire. It was something more primal, more absolute, a feeling of recognition, as if he had been searching for her his entire lonely life without even knowing it. Lena felt the shift in the air, the sudden, charged intimacy of his stare. It made her deeply uncomfortable. She broke eye contact first, her focus returning sharply to the wound. This is going to require about 15 stitches. And a tetanus shot. Have you had one in the last 5 years? I have no idea, Dante said, though he hadn't heard the question. He was still lost in the color of her eyes. Lena sighed, a small puff of exasperation. Of course not. She worked quickly, her movements economical and precise. She numbed the area, stitched the gash with neat, practiced loops, and bandaged the arm. Throughout it all, she felt his eyes on her. It was like being under a microscope. You're done, she announced, peeling off her gloves. The doctor will sign your discharge papers. Try not to get into any more altercations. She turned to walk away, eager to escape the suffocating intensity of his presence. Lena, he said. He had read the name on her badge. She paused but didn't turn around. Yes. I will see you again. It wasn't a question or a hope. It was a statement of fact, a promise. A shiver, not entirely unpleasant, traced its way down her spine. I work most weekends, she said, a hint of her innate sarcasm breaking through. Try to aim for a less busy night next time. She walked away without a backward glance, leaving Dante Volkov smiling to himself in the chaos of the emergency room, his bandaged arm forgotten. His loyal lieutenant, Mikhail, watched him with a raised eyebrow. Boss? Mikhail asked, his voice low. Find out everything about her, Dante commanded, his eyes still on the empty space where she had been standing. Everything. The pursuit began the very next day. A bouquet of 24 perfect white roses arrived at the nurse's station. The card was simple. For the steady hands, DV. Lena stared at them, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Who's DV? Chloe asked, wiggling her eyebrows. And where have you been hiding him? He's not a him, he's a patient, Lena said, her voice tight. A very strange patient. She promptly took the vase and placed it in the staff break room for everyone to enjoy, a clear, unspoken rejection. Dante was not deterred. He learned her routine with an efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. He knew which coffee shop she went to before her shifts. He knew she always ordered a large black coffee and a plain bagel. He was there the next morning, sitting at a small corner table, looking impossibly out of place in his bespoke suit, sipping an espresso as if he did it every day. Lena stopped dead in the doorway, her heart giving a nervous little jump. She almost turned and walked out, but the need for caffeine was too strong. She squared her shoulders and marched to the counter, pointedly ignoring him. "This is creepy," she said without preamble after she had paid for her order and was forced to walk past his table. He looked up, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Good morning to you too, Lena. How do you know where I get my coffee?" "I'm a resourceful man," he said simply. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" She shot back, her wariness sharpening her tongue. "Is any of this legal?" His smile widened. He was enjoying this. No one spoke to him this way. "Perfectly legal. I'm a citizen enjoying a cup of coffee." He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Will you join me? I have a 12-hour shift in a place filled with sick and dying people. I don't have time for this." She waved a hand vaguely, encompassing him, the suit, the entire unnerving situation. 5 minutes, he countered. "I won't even speak. You can just drink your coffee and I will admire your dedication to your profession from a respectful distance." His self-deprecating humor was unexpected. It disarmed her slightly. Against her better judgment, she found herself hesitating. "I'm not going to bite," he added, his voice softening. Lena let out a long, weary sigh and sank into the chair. 5 minutes, and you're buying next time. It became their routine. He would be there every morning. She would protest. He would charm. She would sit, drink her coffee, and they would talk. She learned that he ran a family business, an import-export conglomerate. It was vague, but she didn't press. She told him about the absurdities of her job, the small tragedies, and even smaller victories. He listened with an attentiveness that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. He was peeling back her layers of cynicism and exhaustion, finding the woman underneath. And she, in turn, was beginning to see past the intimidating facade of Dante Volkov. She saw the loneliness in his eyes, the weight of a responsibility he never elaborated on. She found herself looking forward to their 5-minute coffees, to the verbal sparring that left her feeling energized, to the way his dark eyes would soften when she spoke. "You're smiling," Chloe observed one evening as Lena got ready for a date. Not a coffee, but an actual dinner. He had worn her down. "I am not," Lena denied, but the corner of her mouth was twitching. "It's him, isn't it? The creepy but devastatingly handsome stalker?" "He's not a stalker," Lena mumbled, though she wasn't entirely convinced. "He's persistent." "Lena, be careful," Chloe said, her tone suddenly serious. "A guy like that, he doesn't just happen. Men with that kind of money and power, they live in a different world, with different rules." "I know," Lena whispered. "I know." But a part of her, the part that was tired of just surviving, wanted to see that different world. Just for a little while. Dante's world was one of breathtaking luxury. He took her to restaurants where the menus didn't have prices, to private art galleries, to watch the city lights from the dizzying height of his penthouse apartment. It was a fairy tale, and Lena felt like an imposter in a stolen gown. But strangely, Dante seemed most at ease when he was in her world. He insisted on coming to her tiny apartment for a movie night. He sat on her lumpy couch, ate cheap pizza from a cardboard box, and looked more content than he ever did in a 5-star restaurant. He listened to Chloe's rambling stories with genuine interest and even helped with the dishes. It was in those small domestic moments that Lena truly fell for him. She fell for the man who laughed at her bad jokes, who held her hand while they walked through the park, who looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. She fell in love with Dante, not the enigma. For Dante, these moments were a lifeline. Lena was his anchor to a reality he craved. With her, he wasn't the head of the Volkov Bratva. He wasn't the man who made decisions that ended lives. He was just Dante. The quiet strength he had first seen in her eyes was now the foundation of his world. The thought of losing her was a physical pain, a cold dread that settled deep in his chest. He knew he couldn't keep his two worlds separate forever. The secrets were a chasm between them, and it was growing wider with every passing day. He had to tell her. He had to give her the choice, even if her choice was to walk away. The fear of it nearly paralyzed him, but the fear of lying to her was worse. He chose the penthouse for the confession. It was a fortress of glass and steel high above the city, a symbol of the power he wielded. He needed that armor around him when he made himself vulnerable. Lena knew something was wrong the moment she stepped out of the elevator. The easy, relaxed atmosphere that usually filled the space when they were together was gone. It was replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. Dante was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to her, staring down at the glittering city below. "Dante?" she asked softly. He turned, and the look on his face made her heart clench. He looked haunted. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough. He didn't sugarcoat it. He didn't make excuses. He laid the truth out like a coroner laying out instruments. "My family's business. It's not just import-export, Lena. That's a front. A very successful, partially legitimate front, but a front nonetheless." He took a breath. "My name is Dante Volkov. My father was Dmitry Volkov. He started the Volkov Bratva in this city, and when he died, I took his place. I am the head of the Russian mob." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Bratva, the mob. The name Volkov echoed in the dark recesses of her mind. Whispers she'd heard from cops in the ER, news reports about gang violence, unsolved murders, the violence she treated, the broken bodies that came through the hospital doors. Some of them were because of him, because of his world. Her mind reeled. The expensive gifts, the way people deferred to him, the ever-present watchful Mikhail, the scar on his jaw. It all clicked into place, forming a picture that was monstrous and terrifying. The altercation," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "When you came to the hospital." He nodded, his face a grim mask. "A disagreement with a rival faction. They were luckier than he was." Nausea rose in her throat. The man she loved, the man who held her with such tenderness, was capable of such things. He was a kingpin, a criminal. His hands were stained with things she couldn't even imagine. "I inherited this life, Lena," he said, his voice raw with a desperation she had never heard before. "I never wanted it. It's a cage. But it's the only life I've ever known, until you." He took a step toward her, his hands open, palms up. A plea. "You are the only good, real thing in my life. The only thing that makes sense." Lena took a step back. Her principles, the very core of who she was, were screaming. She was a healer. Her entire life was dedicated to saving lives, to mending what was broken. He was a part of the world that did the breaking. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. "I can't," she choked out, the words tearing from her throat. "Dante, I can't." The hope in his eyes died. It was the single most painful thing she had ever witnessed. He had known this would be her answer. He had prepared for it, but the reality of it was a knife twisting in his gut. "I love you," she sobbed. "I love the man who eats pizza on my couch. But I can't be with this. I can't be part of a world that profits from pain and violence." She turned, stumbling toward the elevator, her vision blurred by tears. Each step away from him was a physical agony. She was tearing her own heart out. "Lena," he called out, his voice broken. She didn't stop. She couldn't. She jabbed the button for the elevator, praying for it to come quickly. He didn't follow her. He gave her that. He stood in the middle of his gilded cage, watching the only good thing in his life walk away. The elevator doors slid shut, and he was alone again, plunged back into the suffocating darkness he had briefly, miraculously, escaped. The days that followed the goodbye were a gray, featureless landscape of misery for Lena. She threw herself into her work, taking on extra shifts until she was numb with exhaustion. But the numbness never reached her heart. Everything was a reminder, a sleek black car driving past her window, the taste of coffee, the silence in her apartment that was now deafening. You need to eat something, Chloe would plead, pushing a plate of food toward her that she would just stare at. I'm not hungry. Lena, you look like a ghost. You made a choice. The right choice, Chloe added softly. You have to live with it. I know, Lena would whisper, but knowing didn't make it hurt any less. She had chosen safety. She had chosen her principles. But in doing so, she had chosen a life devoid of the vibrant, intense color that Dante had brought into it. She was safe, and she was utterly, completely miserable. Her mother's phone calls, filled with worried, I told you so's, only made it worse. She had been right. Girls like Lena didn't end up with men like Dante. It was a fantasy, and the fantasy was over. For Dante, life without Lena was not life at all. It was a return to an existence he now recognized as a living death. The power he wielded felt like ash in his mouth. The wealth was meaningless. He moved through his days like an automaton, his eyes cold, his heart encased in ice. His ruthlessness in business intensified. He crushed rivals without a second thought, consolidated power with a chilling efficiency. But there was no satisfaction in it anymore. It was just motion, a way to fill the gaping void she had left behind. You should let it go, boss, Mikhail said one night, standing in Dante's office. It was the first time he had ever offered unsolicited personal advice. She's not coming back. Dante didn't look up from the papers on his desk. Leave me. With respect, no, Mikhail said, his jaw set. I have served your family my entire life. I served your father. He was a hard man, but you were different. With her, you were happy. Now look at you. This isn't living. This is haunting your own life. Dante's head snapped up, his eyes blazing with a dangerous fire. But then the fire died, leaving only bleak, empty embers. What would you have me do, Mikhail? She can't accept what I am. Then change what you are, Mikhail said simply. The words hung in the air, audacious and impossible. Change the Volkov Bratva? An empire built on a century of blood and fear? It was unthinkable. It was suicide. But as Dante sat there in the silence of his office, a tiny, insane seed of hope began to sprout in the barren wasteland of his heart. Change what you are for her. He couldn't stand it anymore. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. The ache of her absence was a constant physical presence. He broke. He called her. Lena's heart stopped when she saw his name on her phone. She almost didn't answer, but her hand had a will of its own. Lena! His voice was a rough caress over the line, and she had to grip the counter to stay upright. Dante, don't. One dinner, he begged, and the raw need in his voice undid her. That's all I ask. I want to show you my world. I want to prove I can protect you in it. It was a foolish hope, a denial of the very reason she'd left, but she missed him so desperately that she ignored the screaming voice of reason in her head. One dinner, she agreed, her voice barely a whisper. And that led her to this table, to this moment. Seated among the sharks, feeling like bait. Dante's attempt to integrate her, to prove he could keep her safe in his world, had backfired spectacularly. It had only served to highlight the impossible chasm between them. The woman, Isabella, with her cruel, dismissive words, was the embodiment of everything Lena was not and everything she could never be. When Isabella sneered, "She doesn't belong at this table," Lena had felt a cold wave of despair. The woman was right. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was a nightmare, and she had willingly walked back into it. But then Dante stood, and with his quiet, lethal words, he didn't just defend her. He chose her. He didn't just reject Isabella's insult. He rejected the entire table, the entire life it represented. You're right. She is better than this table. As he led her from the room, his hand warm and firm around hers, Lena felt a dizzying surge of hope. He hadn't just protected her. He had agreed with her. He saw it too. the ugliness, the emptiness. He saw that she didn't belong, not because she was less, but because she was more. Outside, the cold night air was a shock after the stuffy formality of the dining room. Dante didn't stop until they reached his car, the engine already humming, the driver holding the door open. He bundled her inside and slid in beside her, the silence between them thick with unspoken emotion. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice ragged. "I was a fool to think I could just place you in the middle of that. To think that my protection would be enough. It's not. That world, it's a poison, and I brought you right to it." Lena looked at him, at the anguish on his face. "What Isabella said. She was right, Dante. And so were you. I don't belong there." "No," he said, his gaze intense, pinning her in place. "You don't, which is why I'm getting out." She stared at him, her breath catching. "What are you talking about?" "Mikhail was right. I have to change what I am, not just hide it, not just manage it. Change it. I'm tearing it down, Lena. All of it. The illicit businesses, the ties to the underworld, the whole rotten legacy my father left me. I'm going legitimate, completely." The scale of what he was proposing was staggering. It was more than just a business decision. It was a declaration of war against his own past. "Dante, is that even possible? It could be dangerous." "It will be," he admitted, his expression grim. "There are men who will not be happy, men who have profited from the way things are. They will see it as a betrayal, as weakness. They will come for me." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. "Then don't do it." "I have to," he said, his voice dropping to a raw whisper. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing her jawline, his touch sending a tremor through her. "Because a life without you isn't a life. It's just waiting to die. I would rather die fighting to be worthy of you than live another day as the man I am now." It was the most profound declaration of love she had ever heard. It was terrifying and beautiful, and it left her speechless. "This will take time," he continued, his thumb stroking her cheek. "And it will be ugly. I can't ask you to be a part of it. I need you to be safe, far away from the fallout. But when it's done, if I'm still standing, I'm coming for you, Lena. And I will have nothing to offer you but my name and a legitimate life. Will that be enough?" Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. "Yes," she breathed. "Oh, Dante, yes." The months that followed were a trial by fire for Dante. He began the systematic dismantling of the Volkov criminal empire. It was like performing surgery on a monster while it was still awake. Every move was fraught with peril. He sold off the smuggling routes, the illegal gambling dens, the loan sharking operations, absorbing massive financial losses. He funneled the capital into expanding the legitimate arms of his company: logistics, private security, real estate. He cut ties with old family allies, men his father had done business with for decades. They saw it as an unforgivable insult. There were threats. A car bomb outside his office building, expertly disarmed by Mikhail's team. An ambush in a parking garage that ended in a brutal, decisive firefight, from which Dante emerged unscathed, but for a few new bruises. He was tearing down a dynasty, and the dynasty was fighting back. Lena heard about it in whispers and headlines. "Underworld in turmoil as Volkov Group goes legitimate. Rival families vie for power in Volkov vacuum." Every news report sent a fresh wave of terror through her. She prayed for him, lighting candles in a small, quiet church, a practice she hadn't observed in years. She lived in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the phone call that would tell her he was either safe or he was gone forever. Chloe was her rock. "He's a force of nature, Lena," she'd say, wrapping a blanket around her friend's shoulders. "If anyone can do this, it's him." Dante worked relentlessly, fueled by coffee and the image of Lena's face. Her memory was the light at the end of a very long, very dark tunnel. Mikhail never left his side, a silent, loyal shadow who met every threat with calm, deadly force. He was loyal not to the Bratva, but to the man Dante was trying to become. Finally, after 6 months of brutal, bloody work, it was done. The last of the illicit assets was gone. The Volkov Group was a reformed entity, a powerful, completely legitimate global corporation. He had made powerful enemies, but he had also cauterized the wound of his past. He was still a rich and powerful man, but his hands, for the first time, were clean. He didn't call. He didn't send a car. He came to her on foot. Lena was coming home from a late shift, her entire body aching with fatigue, when she saw him standing across the street from her apartment building. He wasn't wearing a suit, but a simple pair of dark jeans and a gray Henley that stretched across his broad chest. He looked thinner, tired. There was a new, faint scar high on his cheekbone. But his eyes were different. The haunted darkness was gone, replaced by a clear, steady light. He was no longer a king in a cage. He was just a man. Her man. Her feet seemed to move of their own accord, carrying her across the street. The traffic, the city noise, it all faded away. There was only him. He met her in the middle of the pavement, the headlights of a passing car illuminating them for a brief second. "It's done," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's all gone. The name is clean." She didn't need any other words. She launched herself into his arms, her own arms wrapping around his neck as if she would never let go. He buried his face in her hair, his strong body trembling slightly. He held her with a desperation that mirrored her own, a raw, possessive grip that said mine, finally, forever. "I was so scared," she wept into his shoulder. "I know," he murmured, his lips against her temple. "I know. But I'm here. I'm here." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. The love in his eyes was a tangible thing, a force that wrapped around her and made her feel safer than she had ever felt in her life. And then he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision of relief and desperation, of promises made and futures claimed. It was the reunion kiss, the end of the separation, the final irrevocable sealing of their bond. It tasted of struggle and victory and a love so profound it had literally reshaped a world. In the middle of a busy city street surrounded by the mundane world that had once seemed so far from his, Dante Volkov, the redeemed kingpin, kissed Lena Petrova, the resilient heart who had saved him. And this time, they both knew it was forever. 2 years later, the grand ballroom of the Volkov Tower, once a place of intimidating power, was filled with flowers and laughter. Lena stood on a balcony overlooking the glittering city, a simple band of platinum on her finger. Dante came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. He no longer wore the weight of his past. He wore his love for her like armor. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured into her ear. She leaned back against his chest, her heart full and steady. Happy anniversary. Her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. With Dante's backing, she had established the Petrova Volkov Foundation, a charitable organization that funded free clinics and healthcare initiatives in the city's most underserved neighborhoods. She still worked a shift at the ER once a week, a grounding ritual that reminded her of where she came from, of the healer she would always be. It was her way of ensuring that his new world, their new world, always gave back. Dante had found a peace he never thought possible. Running a legitimate empire was challenging in its own ways, but it was a clean fight. He was a respected, if still formidable figure in the world of global business. The ghosts of his father's legacy had been banished, replaced by the bright, warm reality of his life with Lena. He was still intense, still possessive, but it was the fierce protectiveness of a man who had almost lost everything and would die before letting it go again. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly, her hand covering his over her stomach. "The power? The danger?" He was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the sprawling city below. "I miss nothing," he said with absolute certainty, "Before you, I had a kingdom of shadows. You gave me a world of light." He turned her in his arms, his dark eyes tender. "You, Lena Volkov, are the only empire I will ever need." He kissed her then, a slow, deep kiss filled with the quiet certainty of their shared future. The past was a scar, a reminder of the battle they had won. Their redemption was complete, forged not in power or wealth, but in the resilient, transformative power of a love that had refused to surrender to the darkness. This story teaches us that true strength isn't found in power or control over others, but in the courage to change for the better. It suggests that love can be a powerful catalyst for redemption, inspiring us to dismantle the darkest parts of our lives to become worthy of the light another person brings. It's a testament to the idea that no one is beyond saving, and that a principled heart can be the anchor that guides even the most lost soul home. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. We work hard to create stories that are not only entertaining, but also offer meaningful insights into human nature and the power of positive change. If this story of love and redemption resonated with you, please show your support by giving this video a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel for more dramatic tales, and sharing it with someone who appreciates a powerful love story. Now we'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in Lena's shoes when Dante first confessed the truth about his life? Would you have walked away, or would you have tried to stay? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And for our next story, we want your input. Should we follow the loyal Mikhail as he finds his own unexpected and dangerous romance? Or should we see what happens when Lena's best friend Chloe gets swept up in a dramatic story of her own? Vote in the poll and help us decide what comes next.